Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to this evening session of 12th day of a month-long global festival of Oneness 2021 to celebrate Bhagavad Adi Shankaracharya Jayanti Utsav, arranged by Advaita Academy. Let us start with chanting of a Shanti mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We are privileged to have Krishnamani Keshirajuji to enlighten us on the Bhagavad Gita Self-Management and Success Redefined. Krishnamani Keshirajuji is a mechanical engineering graduate with professional qualifications in management and law. He has more than 41 years of experience in industry and academia. Currently, he runs his own consulting and trading business. Study and research in ancient Indian philosophical and spiritual literature is his passion. He is engaged in synthesizing ancient and modern thought on the deeper aspects of life and its purpose. He is a keen student of Vedanta, Theosophy, and Jiddu Krishnamurti's teachings. Krishnafani is an invited speaker at various management and spiritual forums. Krishnafani Keshirajuji is a program director at Ritambara Wellness Private Limited, an enabler for spiritual and transcendental dimensions of holistic well-being at Ritambara through contemporary interpretations of the contents of ancient Indian spiritual literature to make it contextual to today's living. Bhagavad Gita Self-Management and Success Redefined. Over to you, Krishnapani Keshirajuji. Please start your lecture.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev ji. At the very outset, I wish to profusely thank the Advaita Academy and Sri Harikiran ji, especially, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on the subject which I have given. I will start with sharing my PowerPoint presentation. I hope it's visible. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Let me start with an invocation. Maunavyakhya prakatita parabrahma tattvam yuvanam varshishthante vasadrushiganairavrutam brahmanishtaihi Acharyendram Karakalita Chinmudramanandamurtim Swatmaramam Muditavadanam Dakshinamurtimide Shrutismriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram. The presentation today is a very humble and preliminary attempt to understand the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya of Adi Shankara from a new perspective. Being a student of management, I have realized that of all the aspects of management, the only true, important, and sustaining aspect is self-management. In fact, it is also the most neglected aspect of management. We seem to manage everything external to us and forget about the internal aspects of management. As the English saying goes, what good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their self? What can anyone give in exchange for their self? In fact, the current pandemic has brought into sharp focus the importance of life as also its frailty. The importance of life, as we realize now from the pandemic, has also forced us to reset our goals and reorient our thinking and thus redefine success. Before I delve directly into the subject which I wish to present today, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude what I have drawn from the original Bhagavad Gita Bhashya of Adi Shankara, along with the uh, elaborate commentaries of Sri Alladi Mahadeva Shastri and Sri A.G. Krishna Warrior. Apart from these two works, I had the privilege of referring to the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita by Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, and also the book with the title Bhagavad Gita, A Guide to Navigating the Battle of Life by Professor Ravi Ravindra. So, having acknowledged all these great authors who have given me a deeper understanding of this subject, I wish to proceed with the subject which I have divided into two parts. I have identified 7 pairs of words which are drawn from the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya of Sri Adi Shankara and added to them 7 dimensions of success. What truly means, the word success, what it truly means. So this presentation today is an essay to create a framework for the thesis on which I am working for my own understanding. It's not a scholastic thesis which I'm talking about. It's a kind of a framework for my own inner journey. And my understanding is that all the important and relevant verses of the Bhagavad Gita can be assigned one of these 7 dimensions which I'm going to enumerate and discuss. Now, to start with, as I said, I have selected the 7 pairs of words which occur in the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya. The first one is pravrittihi nivrittihi. Pravrittihi is what we call as the outward movement, and nivrittihi I have called it as the inward movement. At the very beginning of the commentary, in his preamble, Sri Adi Shankara says, Vividho hi vedokto dharmaha pravritti lakshanaha nivritti lakshanascha jagata sthiti karanam. The twofold indeed is the dharma enunciated by the Veda, the one characterized by acquisition, that is pravritti lakshana, and the other by renunciation, and both are required for the maintenance of order in all manifestation. So the emphasis is on a movement which is outward and towards the external world, and also an inward movement within one's own self. So this is one important pair of words, the first important according to me. Then the second one is Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa. Abhyudaya is what is generally translated as prosperity or worldly prosperity, and Nishreyasa is emancipation. Adi Shankara says, Praninam sakshat abhyudaya nishreyasa hetuhu yassa dharmaha brahmanyadhyaihi varnibhihi ashramibihi shreyorthibhihi anushthiyamanaha. That dharma which directly promotes worldly prosperity and emancipation is pursued by all classes and orders of living beings seeking their own welfare. So whether one is seeking worldly prosperity or one is seeking emancipation, it is essentially one is seeking one's own welfare. Or in other terms, we are trying to find happiness through our own means. So this is the second pair of words. And if you can see that pravritti is connected to abhyudaya and nivritti is connected to nishreyasa. So there is a derivative aspect of it as to how pravritti leads to worldly prosperity or abhyudaya and nivritti leads to nishreyasa, or what is generally termed as emancipation, or there are other terms also like moksha, liberation, freedom and all other things. But this very clearly shows that it is the seeking of one's own total and inner welfare, Shreyas. Then we come to the third pair, which I would like to dwell for some time, is Swabhava and Swadharma. Swabhava is the innate disposition and nature of a person, and Swadharma is one's own duty and responsibility. I would like to give a note which I have prepared based on my own understanding of Swabhava and Swadharma. Swabhava is one's innate nature, endowments, qualities, latent talents, propensities, predilections. It is the core of one's individualized being evolved over many lives. That's what is called as Swabhava. Swadharma is related to and defined by the class, station, or situation in life and limited by the external environment for expression. Swadharma, in fact, delineates or delimits the field for the manifestation of one's Swabhava within the limitations imposed by the law of karma. So, Swadharma is the field in which one operates, and every field by definition has a limitation because it is external to oneself. Swabhava and Swadharma have to be matched for deriving optimal advantage and benefits in our present life for our spiritual unfoldment. Now, the most important aspect to be recognized is that from the point of view of manifestation and evolution, the whole movement is towards spiritual unfoldment. Any material development and material unfoldment is only a byproduct or a collateral aspect of the whole developmental process. The general overall movement of this vast stream of life is towards spiritual unfoldment. This aspect has to be recognized, and one has to match the Swabhava and Swadharma to derive the optimal advantage. Now, anything that militates or rebels or revolts against one's Swabhava and or Swadharma is what is called as Paradharma in the Bhagavad Gita. And also he says it is something which is extremely fearful. Paradharmo bhayavaha. And this resorting to Paradharma not only retards spiritual progress but also worldly progress. It applies to both. Paradharma leads to a situation where one is neither here nor there. He is not in a position to progress from a worldly point of view and also not in a position to progress from a spiritual point of view. So this is what is Swabhava and Swadharma, and this is how I interpret and understand it and apply for the specific purpose of spiritual unfoldment. Then we come to the next pair of words, which is avidya and kama, nescience and desire. Nescience, or what is called as ignorance, creates the false sense of I and mine, and this entity, through its self-limiting and self-enclosing nature, seeks fulfillment through external objects attracted by the senses and the mind, resulting in desire for acquisition and enjoyment. Now, the very manifestation is an outward expression which flows from avidya, or what is called in some other terms as maya. Manifestation by itself is self-limiting and self-enclosing. Only the unmanifest, by definition, is infinite. So anything in manifestation, however large or however vast, however humongous it may appear to be, is still self-limiting and self-enclosing. And the very I and mind is the product of this self-limiting and self-enclosing activity of ignorance. In fact, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, avidya is enumerated as the first klesha, the first affliction is avidya. And from avidya flows asmita, the sense of I and mine. And from that to raga and dvesha. And finally to what he calls as abhinivesha, which is actually the automatic tendency for in all of us to seek continuity of the existence as we recognize. It is basically clinging to the known. So we are interested in clinging on to the known, and having created this entity called as I, it externalizes all its activities through the senses and the mind, and all action flows from this pair of afflictions causing misery and pain, avidya kamaha. That's why the commentary says avidya kamavatah eva sarvani karmani. All actions flow from these two aspects. Therefore, in fact, it's actually a triplicity, avidya, kama and karma. So these two are the root of all our actions and also the consequences of all our actions, which are misery and pain essentially. For a true Viveki, nothing really gives pleasure, because at the end of it, there is an ending to everything, and at the end of it, we only find sorrow or misery and pain when we reach that end point. So this is the other one. Then coming to the next one, shoka and moha, grief or sorrow, and delusion or bewilderment. The inevitable and unavoidable repercussion of avidya kama is sorrow and delusion. Adi Shankara says, sukha viyoga nimittaha mohaha, dukkha sanyoga nimittascha shokaha. Delusion or bewilderment is due to separation from the pleasures of life, and grief or sorrow is arising from contact with pain. So this whole transmigratory life continues unabated due to sorrow and delusion. There's no end to it. The flow or the unending cycle of what is called as samsara. The seed of samsara is in shoka and moha. Samsara bija bhutau shoka mohau. So you see, we see a progression in these pairs of words and how involution is taking place, and we're getting stuck more and more into an endless cycle of samsara. Then the other two very important aspects in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhashya of Adi Shankara are the two words Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga. sorry. Sankhya Yoga, Adi Shankara calls it as the yoga of discrimination. And yoga of action is what is called as the Karma Yoga. Now, discrimination connotes that faculty of one's own consciousness between the true self and the non-self. What exactly discrimination is whether we are able to discriminate between Atma and Anatma. Yoga of action, Karma Yoga, on the other hand, signifies two forms of action. One emanating from ignorance or nescience, and the other from detachment. And the purpose of karma is very clearly mentioned as that of purification of the self, or what is called as Atma Shuddhi. Adi Shankara goes on to say that Karma Yoga is the means of attaining the wisdom concerning Sankhya. This yoga, which constitutes the worship of Ishvara, consists in practicing Samadhi or in performing works without attachment after killing all pairs of opposites. Karma Yoga is prescribed for the ignorant. The thesis of Adi Shankara is very clear on this. And it is not for the knowers of the truth. Ajnanam evahi karma yogaha na jnaninam. His commentary on verse number 4-5 mentions this. It is much more important to understand the definition of Sankhya Yoga, which is given at 3 or 4 different places by Adi Shankara, on which I would like to dwell for a few minutes. The term Sankhya has these 3 or 4 meanings. The first one, which appears in the commentary on the shloka number 11 of the 2nd chapter, Yat paramarthatma tattva nirupanam kritam tat Sankhyam, where the Lord elucidates the eternal truth of the self, is Sankhya. Then the second definition appears in the commentary on the verse 39 of the 2nd chapter, Sankhye paramartha vastu viveka vishaye buddhihi. The knowledge of Sankhya or discrimination of the true nature of absolute reality, paramartha vastu viveka. And he also mentions who is a Sankhya, referring to a person. He says, Sankhyanam Atmanatma Vishaya Viveka Vijnanavatam. Sankhyas are those who have the faculty of discrimination between the true self and the non-self. This occurs in the 3rd chapter, verse number 3. Finally, the reference to the various dimensions and definitions of this term Sankhya, we find Sankhyaha Atmajnana Nishthaha. A Sankhya person is one who is established in self-knowledge. Sri Aurobindo, in his commentary on the Gita, or the essays on the Gita, says, Sankhya is the analysis, the enumeration, the separative and discriminative setting forth of the principles of our being, of which the ordinary mind sees only the combinations and results of combinations. And Radhakrishnan puts it thus and says, Sankhya gives an intellectual account of the intuition of the unchanging one. One should be able to intuitively perceive the unchanging one, and Sankhya facilitates that through an intellectual process. So this very firmly establishes the fundamental thesis of Adi Shankara. Then Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is the means of attaining the wisdom concerning Sankhya. And is, as I said earlier, is prescribed for the ignorant. And this is very clearly brought out again by the 2 statements in the Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yogasya Jnana Yogopayatvam Pratipaditam. Yoginaha karma kurvanti sangam tyaktva atmashuddhaye. The yogins perform works for purifying the mind or the self. So this distinction between Sankhya and Karma are brought out very clearly, and this pair of words, Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga, as a very beautiful insight into the whole, what I would like to call as the essence of the Bhagavad Gita from the Advaita point of view. Then we come to the other two terms, the pair of words, Yoga and Kshemaha, prosperity and security. The propensity to seek or acquire the desired object is yoga in one sense, and the anxiety to protect and secure what one has acquired is kshema. These two terms are also defined by Adi Shankara, where he says, Anupattasya upadanam yogaha, upattasya rakshanam kshema. What is not yet acquired, the acquisition of or the tendency to acquire or desire for something which is not yet there is called as yoga. Generally, in all the general terms, especially in astrology and all, they mention these things, that there is vivaha yoga, dhana yoga, gruha yoga, that you have a yoga or you have the possibility of acquiring wealth or getting married or constructing a house. All these things are, the term yoga is used there as dhana yoga, vivaha yoga, and so on and so forth. And kshema is what refers to as securing or protecting or maintaining what one has already acquired is kshema. But Adi Shankara, the Bhagavad Gita itself, very clearly it is mentioned that including the Vedas, all are bound by the Trigunas. So he urges, Bhagavan Sri Krishna urges in the 45th verse of the second chapter, where he says, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. Become Nistraigunya. Transcend the Trigunas. Nirdvandva. Transcend the dualities. Nityasatvastha. Be firmly established in one's own innate capability. And again he says, Niryoga Kshema. Go beyond yoga and kshema. And such a person can only become an Atmavan. This term yoga kshema is very popular, made popular by the LIC of India, Life Insurance Corporation of India. It says yoga kshemam vahamyam. It is again drawn from the 9th chapter, where Sri Krishna very pertinently puts two conditions. One is ananyas chintayantaha. Constant contemplation and dwelling upon that with single-mindedness to the exclusion of everything else, and also being ever integrated in oneself. Ananyas chintayantaha is one aspect, and nityabhiyukta, being ever integrated in oneself. Only for such a person, he assures that he will take care of his yoga kshema. It's not merely taking care of the yoga and kshema of everybody just for the heck of it and just like that. No, it doesn't happen that way. It is only for those who are ananyas chintayantaha and nityabhiyuktaha. This again is the pair of words which gives an insight into the very nature of divinity. So these are what I have called as the 7 pairs of words, starting with pravritti and nivritti, abhyudaya and nishreyasa, swabhava and swadharma, avidya and kama, shoka and moha, sankhya and karma, and finally yoga and kshema. Now this sets the background for the 7 dimensions of success as redefined. In my presentation, I am going to the second aspect of the presentation now. Now the 7 dimensions of success. Whenever we talk about success, generally we look at it from the point of view of worldly success. But the Gita, at the very beginning, in the commentary of Adi Shankara, he sets out the essential purpose of life. And he says, Asya Gita Shastrasya Sankshepadah Prayojanam Param Nishreyasam Sahetukasya Samsarasya Atyantoparamalakshanam. Succinctly, the purpose of the science of Gita is to set forth the Sammam Bonam. Sammam Bonam means the supreme, the highest or ultimate good from which all others are derived. This is the term used by Sri Warrior, A.G. Krishna Warrior. Sammam Bonam is a word derived from the Western philosophy, Aristotelian philosophy, which refers to the ultimate good from which all others are derived and all actions move in that direction of happiness. So it is Param Nishreyasam. The essential purpose of life is very clearly set forth right at the beginning. It's not Abhyudaya. Abhyudaya is as I said, a byproduct or a collateral development of all activity, which is essential because we have an embodied, we are all embodied beings. Right? So it is Param Nishreyasam. And what is the means of attaining this Param Nishreyasam? Again, he very clearly sets forth and says, Tasmat Gita Shastre Kevalat eva Tattva Jnanat Moksha Praptihi Na Karma Samuchitat Iti Nischitaha Arthaha. Therefore, according to the science of the Gita, the attainment of liberation is only by means of the choiceless awareness of the truth and not through the aggregation of actions, karma samuchita. This is the indubitable meaning and basis of this Shastra. I have deliberately used a term which is very close to my heart and which is drawn from the teachings of Jiddu Krishnamurti, which is choiceless awareness of the truth. I have translated the word Kevalat eva Tattva Jnanat. It is that essential knowledge or wisdom awareness which alone leads to freedom, or what he calls as moksha prapti. In fact, Adi Shankara himself says in the Gita's commentary that jnana is only for ending ajnana and not for attainment of moksha as we normally think in terms of a worldly objective. Because he says the ultimate reality is causeless and it is already there. You do not bring it into existence through your sadhana or through your action. So we should not be in a frame of mind thinking that moksha prapti is something like attaining something, because it is not a thing as we understand, and it is not a reality which is non-existent when you don't get it. See, normally what happens from a worldly point of view is when I am pursuing a particular path with an objective, it also means that objective as on date is not present or not yet come into being or existence. I am setting up an industry, I am setting up a factory, or I am setting up something from a worldly point of view. That means I am moving in a direction where I am creating something. But here it's not that. You're not creating moksha. It is only realizing the presence of that eternal reality through this wisdom awareness, the tattva jnana. Unfortunately, the English term knowledge is used for jnana, which I am not very comfortable with. And I would prefer the word awareness or realization for jnana. So that is the essential purpose, and the means of attaining it are very clearly brought out right at the beginning in the commentary by Adi Shankara. Now, based on this, as I said, I have identified 7 dimensions of it, and I'll proceed one by one. I think I have another 10 or 12 minutes to go. I'll try to stick to that, and maybe I'll may have to skip some of the details, but I'll introduce you to these 7 dimensions. The first dimension is what I am calling it as Sahaja. The literal etymological meaning of this term is born along with. Saha means along with, Ja means born. It refers to that which is innate to oneself, inherent and inborn. What we can relate it to what we have earlier called it as the Swabhava. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that Arjuna's true nature is noble, valorous, and just. However, through delusion and being immersed in sorrow, thinks that the war which is imminent is for victory, kingdom, and the pursuit of worldly pleasures. So he has actually forgotten his own innate, inborn nature. And therefore he says, Nakamkshe Vijayam Krishna Nacha Rajyam Sukhanicha Kim no Rajyena Govinda Kim Bhogair Jivitenava. Arjuna views the whole thing from a very limited perception of the lower levels of worldly dharma. Therefore, in the first chapter, he uses terms like Varna Sankara, Lupta Pindodaka Kriya, Utsadyante Jati Dharmaha Kula Dharmascha, and Narake Niyatam Vasaha. That means there will be an intermingling of all classes and communities indiscriminately. And the forefathers would be deprived of the what is offered to them as pindodaka or oblation, as they call it. And all jati dharmas and kula dharmas will be uprooted. And it leads to the door of heaven and dwelling in hell on account of all these things. Arjuna himself recognizes this fact in one way. He accepts his inborn nature is overwhelmed. Karpanya doshopahata swabhavaha. My swabhava is overwhelmed by this faint-heartedness, by this wretchedness that is born in me because of this confused state of mind as regards to what is the true law of righteousness. Pruchhamitvam dharma sammudha cheta. So he is in that state of confusion. So unless the first attempt of Krishna in second chapter is to tell him what his true nature is, what his sahaja swabhava is. And therefore, in this third verse of the second chapter, Sri Krishna says, Klaipyam masmagamah parthanai tattvai upapadyate kshudram hrudaya daurbalyam tyaktotishta parantava. Yield not to unmanliness, O Arjuna. It does not become of you. Shake off this petty weakness of your heart and stand up, O terror of your foes. Klaibya means one who is impotent. Krishna uses some strong words. And Swami Vivekananda, in one of his essays on the Gitas and talks on the Gitas, has said that if one reads this one shloka, he gets all the merits of reading the entire Gita. For in this one shloka lies embedded the whole message of the Gita. He was lamenting at the state of wretchedness in which Indians were stuck, because it was during the British era. And he was lamenting and saying that all of us have become impotent and unmanly. And this is the only shloka, he says, by reading which one understands the whole message of the Gita. So the fundamental aspect is to recognize one's own innate nature. What is sahaja swabhava? What is my sahaja swabhava? What are my latent talents? What are my capabilities? What is my true self? What is natural to me? We find, see, this is what is happening all over, where, we are getting into doing jobs or work which we don't understand, which we don't like, which we are not happy with, because one doesn't understand what one's true nature is, what is one's innate capabilities. Then the second aspect is what I call as sarala, or simplifying one's life. When we recognize the innate nature of oneself, along with the true direction in which the Bhagavad Gita is leading us, what is it leading us to? The Bhagavad Gita is a mechanism which is providing a mechanism to untangle all complications in one's life by understanding the fundamental fact. And what is that fundamental fact? The unreal comes not into being, the real never lapses into non-being. The truth about these has been perceived by the seers of reality. Nasato vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate satah. Ubhayorapi drushtvontas tvanayos tattvadarshivih. There is one reality. And that reality is what that never lapses into non-being. It doesn't become asat. And what is asat can never become sat. This fundamental aspect simplifies several things. And that also gives us the recognition that life is a continuum. It is not to be seen as the mere progression between two fixed points of physical birth and death. In fact, somebody has put it much more beautifully and said, life for us is the duration which we spend between one death and another death. Actually, we don't live also. So recognizing that life is a continuum and that the whole manifestation is pervaded by that which is imperishable. Avinashi tu tatvidhi yena sarvamidam tatam, which is ajo nityaha shashvatoyam, which is unborn, eternal and everlasting. So there would be then a complete transformation in one's perception of life, and everything falls into its proper place and proportion. And we are no longer tormented by the apparent dualities in manifestation. We are ever established in poise and equanimity and go beyond prosperity and security. This I have already referred to earlier. The third one, from sahaja to sarala, is the swastha, being stable in oneself. One who is of stable wisdom is content by the self within the self. Atmanyevatmana tushtaha sthita prajna stadochyate. This aspect of sthita prajna, being unperturbed by sorrow and not clinging to pleasure, free of attachment, fear and anger, being a silent observer of all the waves of events and emotions which are coming on their own. This stability is what is required in self-management. This Sthita Prajna, this idea is something, and not only that, but the other aspect of Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha, the self being satisfied by and within itself. This is a recurring theme, and you can find several verses, 317, 6.5 and 620 are some of them which echo the same aspect of not depending on anything external to the self. Atmanyevacha santushtha. Uddhared atmanam atmana atmanam. So one who sees this is in a state of stable mind, in a stable consciousness, whereby he is able to look at what I have termed it as saphala, or the literal meaning of which is with fruit. Saphala, that means along with fruit, or that comes, which comes to fruition. Now, saphala is not success. Saphala is the accompaniment of fruit for every action which is performed. The primary meaning is together with fruit, and the derivative meaning is having good results, productive, profitable, successful, and so on and so forth. So we need to examine closely the primary and not the derivative meaning. And we also need to recognize that this fruit is a consequence of action. So the action predetermines, the action which is performed by us predetermines the result, and it is inevitable and unavoidable. That is what the law of karma very clearly emphasizes. It's like in the worldly point of view also, somehow we got into a frame of mind where we say that I want to make money. We do not understand that money is a consequence of some other action. Money cannot be the primary action. How to make money? You have to find out a way whereby you do something which is productive, which is useful, and somebody is willing to put a value on it and pay you for it. Then only you make money. So this frame of mind in which the modern world is stuck is something which we need to understand very clearly, that you can't have money, making money as your primary objective in life. Similarly, any action, if we are aware of it, it should also give us an indication what will be the consequence of it. And that's why I've called it as the post-operative factor, which is the natural concomitant of the law of karma. And that is what the Gita emphasizes again and says one need not and cannot aspire for or hanker after it. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbuhu ma te sangostva karmani. There's no point or no purpose in hankering after the fruit, because the fruit is a natural consequence of action. So what is the focus is to be on the action. That's what is emphasized here, and repeatedly this idea is brought out. Yogastha kuru karmani. And therefore he says, Kripanaha phalaheta, only the miserable and the wretched fellows are after fruit. What is important is yoga karma sukhaushala. And being in a state of equanimity. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Then automatically what comes is samruddha or prosperity. So when one realizes that action determines the outcome, the focus shifts to action. When the actor is right, every action of his will automatically be right. This is a statement which I have taken from one of the books of Professor Ravi Ravindra, from the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, or the what he calls as a guide to navigating the battle of life. He's put it very beautifully. He says, when the actor is right, every action will be right. We need not look at every action independently to see whether it is right or wrong. What is important is that the actor should be right. So hence such a person does not engage in seeking fulfillment of desires. For such a person, the self also becomes irrelevant. Therefore, there is nothing which is binding him. Can there be a more prosperous or abundantly endowed person than one who is contented? There cannot be anything more prosperous than contentment. Such a person is abundantly endowed with peace. The Bhagavad Gita uses these three terms: nispruhaha, nirmamaha, nirahankaraha, sashantim adhigacchati, vihaya kamanyah, sarvan pumans charati, nispruhaha, nirmamaha, nirahankaraha. Prosperity does not signify mere money and facilities. It is that state of mind of non-covetousness, non-mindness, and egolessness. This is what gives true prosperity, and this is what is true prosperity. Then such a person is abundantly endowed and is truly prosperous. Then the other dimension is sampanna. The sixth dimension, which I have called is accomplished or complete, completion. The terms perfect and excellent are also given as the meanings for this word sampanna. The necessity for compulsion and closure of all actions which lead to personal consequences is repeatedly emphasized in the Gita. Actions and undertakings which are not driven by desire, unattached to the fruits of action, ever content, totally independent, renouncing all sense of possession, free from all expectations, and the self integrated in one's own consciousness forms the essential aspects of Jnana Yoga. I'm not going to read the references because I think I have already exceeded. I have one more point to make. One should reach a stage in life where there is absolutely no motivation to pursue personal pleasure, and all action should be oriented towards loka sangraha. Only such a person is a sampanna, who has accomplished and who has drawn a closure to all personal motivation and personal pleasure and action driven by desire. Then finally, we come to this term which I am calling it as Sampurna, or the plenum of divine consciousness. The word Sampurna signifies that which is completely filled, and Advaita does not posit Shunya nor recognizes it as a basis of its thesis. It is antithetical to even consider that which is infinite to be an emanation or extension of nothingness. The word Brahman is a symbol of that which is infinitely vast, the subliminal, transcendent, unlimited, ultimate reality beyond manifestation and even beyond the unmanifest. Avyaktat param. By its very definition, it cannot be dual. It can only be one, uniform, indivisible, and nothing can touch it. I have also made one or 2 points here. The divine mystery lies in the fact that this subliminal, transcendent, ultimate reality is what provides the ground and meaning for all manifestation. Adi Shankara, at the very beginning of his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, provides clarity and hence makes the whole scheme of manifestation and evolution simple. All actions which emerge from the ignorant apparent self can only be limited, partial, and fragmented, and thus leave a residue, which in turn leads to unavoidable consequences. Action which flows from intelligence or prajna leaves no residue and is complete in itself, and therefore do not attach to the ignorant self, which in the 18th chapter, the term Naishkarmya Siddhi is used. The primary purpose of the science of Gita is very clearly enunciated as ultimate emancipation or param nishreyasam from the bondage of transmigratory life stuck in manifestation. I have given about 15 or 16 references related to this aspect of Sampurna. And the Bhagavad Gita very clearly indicates towards this Purnatva. And because of paucity of time, I'll not give it. This presentation will be available. I can share with it. I would close with the beautiful Shanti mantra with which we have opened today's program. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I'm sorry for overshooting the times allotted. I think now we can take up any questions and answers which are there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for enlightening lecture. We have a couple of questions. I will take those questions in seriatim. First question is, when Swabhava and Swadharma are not in compliance, still is it possible to justify the worldly requirements with the help of Karma Yoga?
So see, for most of us, this is the situation. For most of us, Swabhava and Swadharma are not in compliance. So what happens is, we pursue the worldly requirements, and Karma Yoga helps you to understand that because of this conflict of non-compliance between Swabhava and Swadharma, they are going to lead to some form of conflict, some form of misery and sorrow. So one should be in a position to accept that with equanimity, because it is not something outside oneself. My Swabhava and my Swadharma are not matching. The consequence of it can only be sorrow and pain. But Karma Yoga teaches you not to hanker after the fruit of action, and also acceptance of any fruit of action which may come as a consequence of whatever we do. So we will continue to act in this world, but we can reorient ourselves with the knowledge which is imparted in the Gita. So that reorientation is what is required, and we need to redefine every term. That the reason why I have said the success redefined is also that our perception is so fragmented, so limited, and so very narrowed down, that it inevitably causes conflict with everybody. In every relationship, there will be a conflict. So we have to reorient ourselves.
Yeah. Second question is if samsara means cycle of shoka and moha, even if we do some karya, either it gives shoka or moha, how can you get away from these both? Please explain a little about this question.
See, samsara, the word samsara means samsruti is continuity. And it is endless. Endless in the sense, it is not infinite. It is caught in a loop. It is caught in a loop. So you have a circle. A circle is essentially unending. That means there is no beginning or no ending to it. It is because it is an enclosed entity. So when you are caught either on the periphery of the circle or within the circle, you are caught in limitation. And all limitation leads to sorrow and delusion. So the only way is to move in a perpendicular direction to this cycle, to this circle. From a mathematical point of view, it's a two-dimensional thing. A circle is there. Now, as long as you are in those dimensions, in those two dimensions, you cannot move away from it. You have to take a vertical takeoff. That vertical takeoff is what is the jnana that is provided by the Bhagavad Gita. The jnana, or that wisdom awareness which is given to us, which tells us that first is to become aware of the fact that we are caught in sorrow and delusion. Becoming aware of that itself is the most important thing. But unfortunately, what happens is we take it for granted. Taking it for granted is not understanding or becoming aware. Becoming aware is to become acutely attentive and acutely aware of the fact that all actions in some form or the other are limited by nature and will come to some end, and the pleasure which I am seeking is not going to last forever, and the more I hanker after it, the more I get caught in it. That's why he says sukha viyoga, being detached from pleasure is one aspect of it, and being attached to pain is the other aspect of it. So we have to move in a direction tangentially and vertically away from this cycle of shoka and moha. And that is the wisdom that is provided in the Bhagavad Gita. The references which I have given subsequently, several references which I have given, are indicative of that means. How to make one's life complete, purnatva. That is success. Attaining that purnatva is success redefined. Those means are all given. I have enumerated about 15 or 16 of them. I could not go into the listing of because of the lack of time.
One more question I will take is,
yes.
COVID times, how does this knowledge help to face the sorrow and grief?
Sir, as I said right at the beginning, has it not brought COVID, has it not brought into sharp focus the importance of life? Has it not also brought into focus how many of our actions are totally unnecessary and irrelevant? Totally unnecessary and irrelevant. How the whole economy is created through hype in marketing and providing you worldly goods merely for the sake of enjoyment, and we pour in billions and billions of dollars into this enjoyment. Very beautifully, Jiddu Krishnamurti used to make a point that either humanity will move in the direction of enjoyment and gratification, or it will move inwards into one's own self. I think this pandemic has given us that opportunity to reverse that direction and move inwards. And the things are, you see, whether you take it as compulsory or voluntary is dependent on you. Whether you are happy being alone or whether you are frustrated is what you have to decide for yourself. So we have to reset our goals, reorient our thinking, and redefine what we mean by success for us. So this is the pandemic is a great opportunity, which has brought several aspects which have given a new, freshness of vision to even children. Even children have reconciled to these things, and now they recognize the fact that being in the family, being with the parents, and operating in one's own limited field is good for them.
So it is opportunity to become Avrutta Chakshu rather than Bahirshya.
Yes. Open the Jnana Chakshu.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That brings an end to this beautiful session. Another beautiful session, I would say. There's a series of beautiful sessions going on for last 12 days. Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I thank all the participants.